Mira had always believed that life followed a clear path. She thought if she worked hard, followed the rules, and made careful choices, everything would turn out well. For many years, that idea had guided her. She lived in a small apartment in a busy city. Her days were full of work, meetings, and small routines. She had friends, some of whom she met during her university years, and she enjoyed the occasional outing to the park or a quiet cafe. Life was not perfect, but she felt safe and comfortable. Then everything changed. Mira's company, where she had worked for 5 years, suddenly announced it was closing. The news hit her like a cold wave. Her savings, carefully accumulated for emergencies and small luxuries, were not enough to sustain her for long. The apartment she had rented for years was repossessed because she could not keep up with the payments. Even her friends seemed to drift away as she struggled to manage the stress and disappointment. Mira felt like the ground beneath her had disappeared. She could not see any familiar structures left to hold her up. She wandered through the city streets one evening, feeling invisible among the crowds. People rushed past her, talking, laughing, and living their lives, while she felt stuck in a bubble of her own despair. The bright lights and constant noise only made her feel smaller. Mira realized that staying in the city, where everything reminded her of what she had lost, was not helping her recover. She needed a fresh start, a place far from the walls that held her memories. Mira had always loved nature. Even as a child, she had enjoyed visiting forests and rivers with her grandmother. Her grandmother often spoke about the peace that came from living close to the earth, the joy of growing your own food, and the satisfaction of creating a life from what nature offered. Mira had loved those stories but had never imagined herself living that way. However, now, with nothing left in the city, the idea of returning to nature felt like a lifeline. One morning, Mira packed a small backpack. She included a few clothes, some non-perishable food, a water bottle, a first aid kit, and her grandmother's old notebook. She carried her drawings and memories carefully, feeling that they were her last connection to the life she had known. With a deep breath, she left the city behind. She walked past the last buildings, past the noise and chaos, and finally reached the edge of a forest. The trees stretched high into the sky, their leaves whispering in the wind. The air smelled fresh, clean, and alive. Mira felt her chest lift as if she had taken her first true breath in months. The forest was dense, with sunlight filtering through the branches in golden streaks. Birds sang from the treetops, and the distant sound of a river created a calm rhythm that made Mira's heart beat slower. She walked carefully, exploring the area, looking for a place to settle. After a few hours, she found a small clearing near the riverbank. The ground was soft with grass, and the sunlight created warm patches where she could sit. The river moved gently, its water clear and sparkling. Mira decided that this place would be her new home. She felt a sense of belonging she had not expected. Her first task was survival. She found wood for a small fire and gathered stones to create a fire pit. She collected water from the river, filtering it as best as she could, and she foraged for edible plants nearby. The first days were difficult. Her hands were sore from collecting wood, and she often felt tired from walking long distances in the forest. At night, the cold air crept into her clothes, and she had to wrap herself tightly to sleep. Mira missed her old life, the comfort of her bed, and the warmth of a city apartment. Yet each morning she woke up to birdsong and sunlight filtering through the trees, and she felt a strange happiness she had never known in the city. As she settled into this new life, Mira began to notice details around her that she had never paid attention to before. The way sunlight moved through the leaves, creating patterns on the ground, fascinated her. The way ants carried food along the forest floor made her marvel at nature's small but persistent rhythms. Even the river seemed alive, its water changing speed and sound with the seasons. Mira started sketching everything she saw in her grandmother's notebook. She drew the trees, the river, the animals, and even her own small shelter. Drawing gave her a sense of control and creativity that she had not felt in years. It reminded her that even when everything else was gone, she could still create. After a week, Mira began expanding her little camp. She built a small bench from fallen branches and tied pieces of cloth to create a shade over her cooking area. She learned to make a simple trap for fish in the river and discovered edible mushrooms and berries that grew nearby. She experimented with making tools from stones and sticks, practicing patience and skill. Mira's life became a rhythm of work and rest, observation and learning. Each day she felt stronger and more capable. She realized that losing everything in the city had forced her to discover parts of herself she had never known. Mira also noticed animals coming closer to her camp. A small rabbit appeared near the river, watching her with curious eyes. Birds would land on branches above her tent, singing without fear. One evening, she saw a fox watching her from the edge of the clearing. Instead of fear, Mira felt connection. She began leaving small pieces of food for the animals and talking to them softly. They became her companions in a way she had never experienced with people. She felt less alone. In her spare time, Mira explored deeper into the forest. She discovered hidden clearings, old trees with hollow trunks, and a waterfall that sparkled in the sunlight. She imagined building small paths to these places, creating a network of areas where she could rest, draw, and reflect. The forest, which had once seemed intimidating, now felt like a canvas for her new life. Every day brought a new discovery, a new skill, or a new moment of wonder. Mira felt her mind and body growing stronger. At night, Mira would sit by the fire with her notebook, writing and drawing about her experiences. She wrote about the city she had left behind, the mistakes she had made, and the lessons she was learning in the forest. She sketched animals, plants, and the patterns of the stars above. She even began to design small furniture and structures she might build with her own hands. Each sketch and note filled her with hope. Mira realized that losing everything had not ended her life. It had opened a new chapter filled with potential. As the weeks passed, Mira's confidence grew. She could start a fire quickly, find water safely, and create food from what the forest provided. She felt independent and free. More importantly, she felt alive. She had discovered a life that did not depend on money, apartments, or crowded streets. She had discovered a life connected to the earth, to animals, and to herself. The forest had become her teacher, showing her patience, resourcefulness, and resilience. Mira knew that one day she might want to share what she had learned with others. But for now, she focused on creating her own world. She imagined a home built from natural materials, a garden where she could grow her own food, and a studio where she could draw, paint, and experiment with ideas. She began collecting materials carefully, thinking about how she could transform her small clearing into a place of beauty and comfort. Mira felt a deep satisfaction that no city apartment could have given her. Though Mira had lost everything in the city, she realized she had gained something even more valuable. She had found herself, her strength, and her creativity. She had discovered a connection to the world around her that was more real than anything she had experienced before. The forest had become her sanctuary, and every day she lived there taught her that life could be rebuilt, even from the lowest point. Mira understood that her journey had only begun, and that the story she was creating in the woods would one day surprise everyone who doubted her. Mira sat by her fire one evening, watching the sun set over the river. The sky was painted with gold and pink reflecting in the water. She felt a smile spread across her face. She had no home in the city, no friends to call, and no steady job. But she had life, creativity, and hope, and for the first time in months, Mira felt truly free. Mira woke up to the soft sound of birds singing and the gentle flow of the river. She stretched her arms and looked around her small clearing. The forest was alive with movement and color. The sun touched the tops of the trees and the dew on the grass sparkled like tiny diamonds. Mira smiled, feeling a sense of purpose she had not known in years. Today, she decided, she would begin creating something bigger than herself, something that would reflect all she had learned in the forest. She had spent weeks observing the land, noting how the sunlight moved across her clearing at different times of day, which areas stayed dry, and which patches of soil were soft and rich. She had drawn small sketches of her ideas in her notebook, imagining structures that could blend into the forest naturally. Mira wanted her creations to honor the beauty around her, not disturb it. She wanted a place that could protect her from rain, offer comfort, and allow her to work on her drawings and experiments without leaving the forest. Mira began by collecting fallen branches, logs, and stones. She avoided cutting down trees or taking anything alive. She wanted to work with what the forest had already provided. Her hands were rough and scratched from gathering and carrying materials, but she felt proud of her effort. She arranged the logs in a circle near her tent, thinking carefully about how they could form the base of her structure. She realized she needed a plan, so she sat with her notebook and drew diagrams of a small hut with a roof that sloped to allow rain to pass, and a floor elevated slightly from the ground. Building the hut took Mira longer than she expected. She had never made a permanent structure before, But she used her creativity and problem-solving skills to overcome each obstacle. She tied logs together with vines, layered leaves and bark to make a waterproof roof, and filled gaps with mud mixed with grass to prevent drafts. Her hands ached every night, but she refused to give up. Each piece she added brought her closer to her vision. She imagined sitting inside with a warm fire, looking at her sketches and feeling safe in a world she had built with her own hands. While building, Mira also began experimenting with small gardens. She noticed patches of wild herbs, berries, and edible flowers near her clearing. She carefully transplanted some to areas near her hut, making little rows and beds. She started watering them daily with river water and protecting them from animals using small fences made from sticks. Mira had never thought she would enjoy gardening, but she found it calming. She watched as the plants grew slowly, taking pride in each new leaf, each small flower, and each berry that appeared. The forest, which had once been a place of survival, was now becoming a home she could shape and improve. One day, Mira discovered a fallen tree that had created a natural arch over a small part of the riverbank. She examined it and realized that it could be transformed into a bridge. The river at that spot was shallow but slippery, and she had sometimes worried about crossing it. Mira decided to use vines and branches to strengthen the fallen tree, creating a simple bridge that would allow her to cross safely. She worked for hours, carefully tying the vines and testing the stability. When it was finished, she stepped onto the bridge and felt a rush of accomplishment. She had turned something the forest had abandoned into something useful and beautiful. Mira's confidence grew with every project. She began collecting stones to create a small path from her hut to the river, making it easier to carry water and food. She arranged them neatly, pressing them into the soil so they would stay in place. She even used moss and small flowers between the stones to make the path more colorful and inviting. As she worked, she realized she was not just surviving in the forest. She was creating a life full of purpose, beauty, and order. Her life became a rhythm of activity and reflection. She would wake up with the sun, work on building or gardening, explore new parts of the forest, and then sit by the fire in the evening to sketch and write in her notebook. Mira noticed how much her confidence had grown. She could now climb small hills, carry heavy logs, and build structures that would last through rain and wind. Each day she learned more about the forest, about survival, and about her own strength. Mira also began thinking about the animals she had seen around her. She realized that her presence could affect their lives. She decided to create small areas for them near her camp. She set up a few stones and logs where birds could perch safely, and left some food for rabbits and squirrels. She built a shallow water area for smaller animals that could not reach the river easily. Mira observed how they used these areas and adjusted them carefully. The animals started to trust her, coming closer without fear. She felt a deep connection with the forest and its creatures, realizing that her work was helping all living things around her. Weeks passed, and Mira's hut was almost complete. It had a strong roof, walls made from natural materials, and a small door that opened to the river. Inside, she arranged her notebook, art supplies, and a small fire area. She felt a sense of pride every time she stepped inside. The hut was not just a shelter. It was a reflection of her resilience, creativity, and love for the forest. Mira realized that even though she had lost everything in the city, she had built something far more valuable. She had created a place that allowed her to live fully, safely, and beautifully. One morning, while Mira was working on her garden, she noticed something unusual. A small group of people had appeared at the edge of the forest, looking curious and cautious. Mira froze for a moment. She had expected solitude, but she also knew that people were often drawn to beauty and creativity. She decided to observe them from a distance before approaching. The group seemed amazed by the forest, whispering to each other and pointing at the trees and river. Mira felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She realized that her life in the forest might soon become known to others. Over the next few days, Mira continued her work while keeping an eye on the visitors. They returned several times, sometimes taking notes or taking pictures. Mira noticed that they were respectful, staying on the edges of the clearing and not disturbing the animals. She realized they were fascinated by what she had created, a small, thriving home in the middle of the forest, with gardens, paths, and a hut that blended naturally into the environment. Mira felt proud but also cautious. She wanted to protect her sanctuary but also felt a quiet desire to share what she had learned about nature and creativity. Mira decided to take a careful step. She left a small note on a flat rock near the visitor's path, explaining that she had built a home in the forest and asking them to respect her space. She also wrote a few tips about how to observe nature without disturbing it. The next day, she saw the visitors reading the note and smiling. They nodded in appreciation and left quietly, respecting her request. Mira felt relief and joy. She realized that she could set boundaries while still inspiring others. Her forest was her home, but it could also teach lessons to those willing to learn. By the end of the month, Mira's small clearing had transformed completely. The hut was sturdy, the garden was growing beautifully, the paths and bridge were safe and functional, and the animals had areas to thrive. Mira had created a world in the forest that was self-sufficient, beautiful, and peaceful. She felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that every element had been carefully thought out and built with her own hands. The forest had become a place of life, creativity, and harmony. Mira realized that her journey was far from over. She still had many ideas she wanted to explore, from creating more paths and shelters to planting more gardens and observing the changing seasons. She felt that her work in the forest was not just about survival, but about showing that life could be rebuilt with care, patience, and love. Mira smiled at the river, feeling the water flowing past her reflection. She understood that losing everything in the city had been a painful but necessary step. Without that loss, she would never have discovered her strength, creativity, and connection to the world around her. As Mira sat by her fire one evening, watching the stars appear above the trees, she felt a sense of anticipation. She knew that her life in the forest had already surprised her, and that it would surprise others as well. What she had created was not just a home. It was proof that resilience, creativity, and respect for nature could lead to something extraordinary. Mira leaned back, feeling peace in her heart, and allowed herself to dream about the future. She had lost everything, but in the forest she had found more than she could have imagined. As the days passed, Mira continued to expand her small sanctuary in the forest. Her hut stood strong, her garden flourished, and the bridge she had built over the river had become a favorite spot for her to sit and think. She often watched the sunlight sparkle on the water and the animals move through the forest. Each morning she felt a deep gratitude for the life she was building, and each evening she reflected on the day, sketching her experiences in her notebook. One morning, Mira woke to the sound of footsteps nearby. She quickly moved to the edge of her clearing and saw a man standing there, looking cautiously at her home. He wore a backpack and carried a small camera. Mira felt a wave of surprise. She had hoped for solitude, but it seemed that word of her forest life had begun to spread. The man appeared respectful, keeping a distance as he observed her hut and garden. Mira took a deep breath and stepped forward, holding her hands out in greeting. "Hello," she said calmly. "I am Mira. You can see my home, but please respect my space." The man nodded, lowering his camera. "I am Simon. I have heard about your life here. I wanted to see it for myself. Your home is incredible. I did not expect to find something like this." Mira smiled slightly. "Thank you. It has taken a lot of work, but it is my own creation. The forest has taught me many things." Simon looked around with awe. "I can see that. I have traveled to many forests and met people who try to live simply, but you have created something extraordinary. May I ask how you started?" Mira led him to a small bench she had made near the river. She explained how she had arrived with nothing, how she learned to build a shelter, grow food, and live in harmony with nature. She described the process of observing the forest, gathering materials carefully and creating paths, gardens, and spaces for animals. Simon listened intently, taking notes and asking questions. He seemed genuinely inspired by Mira's story and her careful, respectful approach to the forest. Over the next few days, Simon returned several times. Mira showed him her sketchbook and explained her plans for further expansion. She also taught him some of the basic skills she had learned, such as how to make simple tools, grow plants, and move safely in the forest without disturbing wildlife. Simon was amazed by her knowledge and creativity. He began to take photographs of the hut, gardens, and paths, capturing the beauty of Mira's work. Mira, at first cautious, realized that Simon's presence could be a way to share her experience with the world without losing her privacy. Word of Mira's forest life began to spread quietly. Simon shared photographs and stories with a small community of people interested in nature and simple living. Many were inspired by Mira's courage, creativity, and resilience. Messages began arriving from people who wanted to know how she had managed to build a home, grow food, and live independently. Mira felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had always valued her solitude, but she also saw the possibility of inspiring others to respect nature and explore their own creativity. Mira decided to continue building in the forest, expanding her home while remaining mindful of the environment. She collected more fallen logs and stones to create additional structures. She built a small shelter for storing food and tools, and a larger raised platform for sketching and observing the forest. Each structure was carefully planned to blend with the surroundings, using natural materials and simple designs. Mira was determined that everything she created should enhance the forest, not disturb it. The animals in the clearing continued to become more comfortable with her presence. Birds perched on the roof of her hut, squirrels darted along the trees near her garden, and rabbits came closer to eat the food she left out. Mira began to notice how her actions influenced the forest. When she cleared a small area for a garden, she made sure to plant wildflowers nearby to attract insects and birds. When she built a shelter, she left spaces for small animals to pass through. She felt a deep connection to every living thing around her, understanding that her home was not separate from the forest but a part of it. One morning, Mira woke to find a small group of children at the edge of her clearing. They had been guided by Simon, who wanted to show them the possibilities of living in harmony with nature. Mira greeted them warmly and invited them to sit on the bench near the river. She explained how she had started with nothing, how she learned to build and grow, and how the forest had taught her patience and creativity. The children listened with wide eyes, asking questions about the plants, animals, and her home. Mira was careful to encourage curiosity without allowing them to disturb her sanctuary. As the weeks passed, Mira realized that her forest life had taken on a new dimension. She was no longer just surviving and building. She was teaching and inspiring others. People came in small groups, eager to learn about sustainable living, creativity, and resilience. Mira shared her knowledge generously, showing them how to make simple shelters, grow food, and observe nature respectfully. She encouraged them to experiment and learn from their mistakes, just as she had done. Through teaching, Mira discovered another layer of satisfaction. She realized that her journey had meaning beyond her own survival. She was helping others understand that life could be rebuilt even after loss. People left her forest home with new skills, ideas, and inspiration, carrying a piece of her creativity and respect for nature into their own lives. Mira felt joy in seeing their excitement and curiosity. One day, Mira decided to create something truly special in the clearing. She gathered logs, stones, and vines to build a small platform overlooking the river. On this platform, she created a seating area surrounded by flowers and herbs. It was a place where anyone visiting her could sit, relax, and appreciate the beauty of the forest. She even carved small designs into the wood, inspired by the patterns she had observed in the leaves and river. The platform became a favorite spot for visitors, allowing them to connect with nature in a peaceful and creative way. Mira continued to expand her gardens, experimenting with new plants and arrangements. She created a small herb garden for cooking and medicine, a flower garden to attract bees and butterflies, and a vegetable patch that produced enough food for herself and occasional guests. She learned to compost and recycle materials from the forest to enrich the soil. Each new garden brought her a sense of accomplishment and harmony. The forest seemed to respond to her presence. The animals were more numerous and active, and the plants grew stronger and healthier. Mira felt a deep sense of satisfaction in knowing that her work was not only creating a home for herself, but also improving the forest ecosystem. She understood that her creativity, patience, and care could have a positive impact on the world around her. As Mira sat on the river platform one evening, watching the sunset, she reflected on how far she had come. Just a few months ago, she had been lost, alone, and uncertain about the future. Now she had built a home, created gardens, learned new skills, and inspired others. She had transformed her life and, in the process, created something extraordinary in the forest. Mira realized that losing everything had been a turning point. Without that loss, she might never have discovered her strength, creativity, and connection to the natural world. Mira knew that her story was still unfolding. There were more gardens to plant, more structures to build, and more knowledge to share. She also understood that her forest life would continue to attract attention, but she was prepared to balance visitors with her need for solitude. She felt a quiet confidence that she could protect her sanctuary while inspiring others. As night fell, Mira lit a small fire and sat on the river platform. The stars reflected in the water, and the forest was alive with gentle sounds. She thought about the people who had visited, the animals she had befriended, and the plants she had nurtured. Mira felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had taken a life of loss and turned it into a life of creation, learning, and connection. She knew that the forest, once a place of survival, had become a place of wonder and inspiration, not just for herself, but for everyone who came to see it. Mira leaned back on the wooden platform, feeling the cool evening breeze on her face. She smiled, knowing that her work was not finished and that the forest held endless possibilities. She had lost everything, but in the heart of the woods she had discovered a life richer and more meaningful than she could have imagined. Mira felt ready for whatever came next, confident that she could continue to create, inspire, and live in harmony with the world around her. Mira's life in the forest had grown into something extraordinary. Her small clearing, once quiet and hidden, had transformed into a thriving sanctuary. The hut she built with her own hands stood strong among the trees, surrounded by gardens filled with herbs, vegetables, and flowers. Paths led to the river, to small seating areas, and to platforms that Mira had carefully constructed. The animals in the forest moved freely, trusting her presence, and the forest seemed to hum with life and energy. Mira could hardly believe how far she had come. The quiet of her life was now mixed with visitors who came to learn, explore, and be inspired by what she had created. Some arrived in small groups with Simon, who continued to document her forest life and share it with people interested in sustainable living. Others came on their own, curious about the stories they had heard. Mira welcomed those who were respectful, showing them the ways to interact with the forest without harming it. She taught them about gardening, building, observing animals, and appreciating the delicate balance of nature. Mira realized that she had become a guide, sharing the lessons she had learned through experience. Mira also discovered that her work was starting to reach farther than she imagined. A local journalist visited after hearing about her unique home and creative life. Mira was nervous at first but decided to share her story honestly. She spoke about the loss she had faced in the city, the challenges of starting over in the forest, and the process of building a home from natural materials. She described the gardens she had grown, the paths she had created, and the bridges she had built. Mira emphasized the lessons she had learned about patience, resilience, and respect for nature. The journalist listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and taking photographs. When the story was published, it caught the attention of many people. Readers were amazed by Mira's ability to create a thriving home from nothing, her harmony with nature, and her willingness to share her knowledge. Messages of admiration began arriving from all over the region. Some wanted to visit the forest themselves, while others wanted advice on starting small projects at home. Mira felt a mixture of pride and responsibility. She realized that her life in the forest had become a source of inspiration for many, showing that even after loss, a person could create something remarkable. Despite the growing attention, Mira remained focused on her work. She continued to build and expand her home carefully. She constructed a larger platform overlooking the river, adding benches and a shaded area for sitting and sketching. She created a network of small gardens, each with a different purpose, some for vegetables, some for flowers to attract insects, and some for herbs that could be used for cooking or remedies. Mira even began designing a small area for visitors to sit and learn. Without disturbing the natural balance, she wanted her forest home to be both functional and beautiful. The animals in the clearing continued to thrive. Birds nested in the trees above the platforms. Squirrels ran along the paths, and rabbits and other small creatures moved freely among the gardens. Mira paid careful attention to their needs, creating small water areas, leaving safe spaces for them to hide, and ensuring that no harmful materials were introduced to their environment. She felt a deep connection to every living thing around her. The forest had become more than a home. It was a living, breathing community, and Mira was an active part of it. One morning, Mira noticed a small group of students arriving at the edge of her clearing. They were part of a school program focused on environmental education. Mira greeted them warmly and led them to the river platform. She explained how she had built her home, grown her gardens, and created spaces for animals. She demonstrated simple techniques for planting, constructing small shelters, and observing nature responsibly. The students were fascinated, asking questions and taking notes. Mira realized that teaching others brought her its own joy, and she felt proud to be helping young people connect with the natural world. As weeks turned into months, Mira's forest home continued to evolve. She built a small compost area to recycle organic material and enrich the soil for her gardens. She experimented with new plants and garden arrangements, discovering which ones thrived best in her forest environment. Mira also started sketching plans for additional structures, imagining spaces where she could host small workshops or allow visitors to stay overnight without disturbing the balance of the forest. She felt inspired by the possibilities, knowing that her creativity could continue to grow alongside the forest. Visitors became more regular, but Mira carefully maintained boundaries. She established simple rules for entering her clearing, explaining that the forest was a shared space for humans and animals. People were expected to follow paths, avoid disturbing wildlife, and respect the natural materials she had used in her constructions. Mira's approach was gentle but firm. She wanted her home to remain peaceful, functional, and beautiful, even as more people learned about it. The local community also began to take notice. Some neighbors visited to offer support, or simply to see the incredible transformation Mira had achieved. They were impressed by her creativity, resourcefulness, and dedication. Mira realized that her work was not only changing her own life, but also inspiring others in her town. People began to understand that even in difficult circumstances, it was possible to rebuild, innovate, and create beauty. Mira felt gratitude for the support and admiration, knowing that it encouraged her to continue her work. Mira's daily routine had settled into a satisfying rhythm. She woke with the sun, tended her gardens, checked on her structures, observed the animals, and explored new areas of the forest. She spent her evenings sketching, writing in her notebook, and reflecting on the day. Her home had become a place of learning, creativity, and connection. Mira understood that she had achieved something extraordinary, not because of money or recognition, but because of her determination, imagination, and care for the world around her. One day, while Mira was tending to a new flower garden, she noticed a group of photographers arriving quietly at the edge of the forest. They had heard about her unique home and wanted to capture it for a magazine feature. Mira watched them carefully, assessing their intentions. She decided to approach them and explain her rules. The photographers nodded, appreciating her guidance, and carefully began photographing her hut, gardens, and paths. Mira felt a sense of pride as she watched them work respectfully. She realized that her home was becoming a symbol of creativity, resilience, and harmony with nature. As news of Mira's forest home spread, more people became interested in sustainable living and creative problem-solving. Some began small projects at home, inspired by her gardens, simple structures, and careful observation of nature. Mira received letters and messages describing how her story had motivated others to try new ideas and appreciate the natural world. She felt a quiet joy in knowing that her life, born from loss, was now inspiring change and creativity in many other lives. Mira also noticed that her own skills and understanding had grown immensely. She had learned to build durable structures, grow diverse gardens, observe animals, and interact with visitors respectfully. She felt a deep sense of mastery over her environment, not in a controlling way, but in a way that allowed her to coexist peacefully with the forest. Mira understood that her home was not just a shelter. It was a testament to what humans could achieve when they combined creativity, patience, and respect for nature. As evening fell, Mira walked along the river, watching the reflection of the sunset on the water. Birds returned to their nests, squirrels darted along the paths, and the gentle hum of the forest filled the air. Mira felt a profound sense of connection and fulfillment. She had turned loss into creation, solitude into community, and uncertainty into beauty. Her forest home had become a place of wonder and inspiration, not just for herself, but for everyone who came to see it. Mira returned to her hut and sat by the fire, thinking about the journey she had undertaken. Just months ago, she had been lost with nothing to her name. Now she had a home, thriving gardens, a community of visitors and students, and a forest that welcomed her presence. Mira understood that the challenges she had faced were essential to discovering her creativity, strength, and resilience. She had learned that even in the darkest moments, it was possible to rebuild, innovate, and create something extraordinary. As Mira looked up at the stars that night, she felt anticipation for the future. There were more gardens to plant, more structures to build, and more people to inspire. She knew that her forest home would continue to grow and evolve, reflecting the lessons she had learned and the care she had given. Mira smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace and purpose. She had lost everything, but in the forest she had created something that would endure and inspire for years to come. The forest had become Mira's world, a place of creativity, learning, and peace. Her hut stood strong among the trees, surrounded by thriving gardens, paths, and platforms that reflected her hard work and imagination. The river flowed gently beside her home, and the animals moved freely without fear. Mira had built more than a home. She had created a sanctuary, a living example of resilience, care, and connection with nature. News of her forest life continued to spread. Local newspapers and online articles described Mira's creativity, the structures she had built, and the harmony she had achieved with her environment. People from nearby towns and cities began visiting, eager to witness the home she had built from nothing. Mira welcomed them carefully, guiding each visitor and showing them how to enjoy the forest respectfully. She taught them how to observe animals without disturbing them, how to grow plants thoughtfully, and how to build small structures using natural materials. The visitors were amazed. Many of them had never seen such careful attention to both beauty and sustainability. They admired the bridges, the paths, the flower and vegetable gardens, and the small water areas Mira had created for animals. They marveled at her hut, which blended perfectly with the forest, and at the platforms where she sat to draw and reflect. Mira explained that every design and construction was inspired by the forest itself. She encouraged visitors to see nature as a partner rather than something to control or dominate. Some of the visitors were inspired to try similar projects at home. Mira received letters and messages describing small gardens, birdhouses, and simple paths that people had built after visiting her forest. She smiled, realizing that her work had a ripple effect far beyond her clearing. What had begun as a personal journey of survival and creativity had grown into a source of inspiration for many. Mira felt proud, but she also remained humble, knowing that it was the forest that guided her, teaching patience, observation, and care. Mira's daily life continued to balance work, reflection, and teaching. She tended her gardens, maintaining healthy soil, planting new herbs, flowers, and vegetables, and caring for the animals that shared her space. She checked the structures she had built, repairing small gaps and reinforcing areas where wind or rain had caused minor damage. Mira explored new parts of the forest, sketching the land, studying plant growth, and noticing seasonal changes. Every day brought new challenges and opportunities for creativity, and Mira embraced them with energy and joy. One morning, Mira noticed a small group of students arriving quietly at the edge of her clearing. They were from a nearby school that specialized in environmental studies. Mira greeted them warmly and guided them through her home. She showed them the hut, the gardens, the bridges, and the platforms. She explained how she had learned to live in the forest, how she built structures using natural materials, and how she observed and cared for the animals. The students listened intently, asking questions and sketching in their own notebooks. Mira realized that teaching the younger generation was one of the most fulfilling aspects of her work. The students spent several hours learning from Mira. They planted small flowers, helped carry water for the gardens, and observed birds and squirrels in their natural environment. Mira encouraged them to think creatively, to try new things, and to respect the forest. She emphasized that success in the forest came from patience, observation, and learning from mistakes. By the end of the visit, the students had not only gained skills but also a sense of wonder and respect for the natural world. Mira felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that her experience could inspire others to live thoughtfully and creatively. Mira also began creating small workshops in her clearing. She built a platform specifically for teaching, with benches and shaded areas for visitors to sit comfortably while learning. She organized sessions on gardening, building, and sketching. She encouraged participants to observe the forest carefully before starting any project, and to use only materials that would not harm the environment. The workshops became popular, attracting people who wanted hands-on experience and guidance from someone who had built a life entirely in harmony with nature. As more people visited, Mira realized that her forest home had become a model for sustainable living. Local communities began to reach out, asking for advice on creating similar gardens, paths, and shelters. Mira shared her knowledge generously, explaining not just the techniques but also the philosophy behind them: patience, creativity, and respect for life. She encouraged people to start small, learn from their surroundings, and gradually build spaces that reflected their own ideas while maintaining balance with nature. One day, Mira received a message from a group of architects and environmental designers. They had heard about her forest home and wanted to see it for themselves. Mira was cautious but agreed to meet them. When they arrived, she guided them through her clearing, explaining every detail of her hut, bridges, paths, and gardens. The architects were amazed. They praised her ingenuity and creativity, noting how she had designed everything in harmony with the forest. Mira explained that her work was guided by observation and intuition, not formal training, and that anyone could learn to create beautiful, functional spaces if they paid attention to nature. The architects offered to help Mira expand her projects in a way that would reach more people without damaging the forest. They proposed creating guided trails, educational areas, and observation points that would allow visitors to learn safely and respectfully. Mira agreed, seeing the opportunity to amplify her impact. Together, they carefully planned expansions that preserved the forest while making it accessible for educational purposes. Mira was excited, knowing that her forest home could inspire even more people to appreciate nature, creativity, and self-reliance. As the months passed, Mira's forest sanctuary became widely known. People came from different towns and cities to witness her creativity, learn her techniques, and experience the peace of her home. Mira continued to teach, guide, and expand her gardens and structures. She created spaces for workshops, observation platforms, and quiet areas for reflection. Every design was intentional, blending with the forest and maintaining the natural harmony that Mira valued. The animals, too, thrived, moving freely and safely among the visitors. Through all of this, Mira never forgot the lessons of her early days in the forest. She remembered the fear and uncertainty she had felt when she first arrived with nothing. She remembered the hours of work building her first hut, planting her first gardens, and creating paths and bridges. Mira understood that her success was not just about skill, but about resilience, patience, and the willingness to learn from the world around her. Her life in the forest was a testament to what humans could achieve when they embraced creativity, hard work, and respect for nature. One evening, Mira sat on her river platform, watching the sunset. The sky glowed in shades of orange and pink, reflecting on the water. Birds returned to their nests, squirrels darted along the paths, and the forest was alive with quiet activity. Mira thought about how far she had come, from losing everything in the city to creating a thriving home and community in the forest. She felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. The forest had given her a second chance, and she had made the most of it. Mira reflected on the people she had met, the students she had taught, and the visitors who had been inspired by her work. She realized that her story was more than a personal journey. It had become a source of hope and creativity for many. Mira felt satisfaction knowing that her experience could motivate others to face challenges, embrace creativity, and live in harmony with the world around them. As night fell, Mira lit a small fire and sat on the river platform. The stars appeared above the trees, reflecting in the calm water. She thought about the future, about the gardens, structures, and educational areas she could continue to develop. Mira felt excitement and peace. She had lost everything once, but in the forest, she had found purpose, creativity, and connection. Her life had become a symbol of resilience and inspiration, showing that even after the greatest loss, it was possible to create something remarkable. Mira knew that the forest would continue to change with the seasons, and that her work would require constant attention and care. She welcomed the challenge. She also knew that her story, shared through visitors, articles, and workshops, would continue to inspire people far beyond her clearing. Mira smiled, feeling fulfillment in knowing that her journey of rebuilding her life had created something meaningful and lasting. She leaned back on the platform, feeling the gentle breeze on her face. Mira thought about how life had once seemed impossible, how she had felt alone and lost. Now she had created a home, a community, and a source of inspiration. She had turned adversity into opportunity, solitude into creativity, and loss into a thriving life. Mira realized that her forest home was more than a place to live. It was a reflection of her strength, imagination, and respect for the world around her. As Mira watched the stars above, she felt a quiet joy. She had started with nothing, yet she had created something extraordinary. Her forest sanctuary was a testament to resilience, creativity, and harmony with nature. Mira knew that her life would continue to evolve. that new visitors and challenges would come and that,